This episode of Keys to the Shop is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Whether it's espresso machines, manual brewing devices, or general coffee shop needs, they seek to pursue the most innovative coffee products, both domestic and abroad, to offer their customers. Find out more at prima-coffee.com. This is Keys to the Shop, episode 67, 6 Truths About Power. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop. My name is Chris DiFiorio. I'm your host. Welcome. I am really glad to be with you today. And I want to say, first of all, a big thank you to our sponsor here at Keys to the Shop, and that is Prima Coffee. Prima is a specialty coffee equipment supplier based out of Louisville, Kentucky. That's right here where the show is based. And since they began their company, they've set out to make the best brewing equipment available to the general public. And their goal is to provide and curate the best equipment for every need. And that runs the gamut from, home espresso machines to commercial espresso machines, under-counter refrigeration, grinders, pour-over setups, you name it. They probably have it at Prima Coffee. You go to prima-coffee.com, their website, and find all of the resources that they have, all the products that they carry, and they do such a great job curating what they offer, making sure that it is top-notch quality for you. And they put a big emphasis on having the expertise to get the right gear to fit every situation. So I highly recommend going to prima-coffee.com and look into what they have to offer. Give them a call. Tell them hello from me at Keys to the Shop. And my thanks to Prima for sponsoring our show and supporting us, and also the industry as a whole by providing us the tools we need to do our jobs well. So I want to say congratulations to the winners of the Spreadsheet Awards, past guests on the show who either own or represent these companies. We've got Onyx Coffee Labs for Notable Roaster. We've got Narrative Coffee with Maxwell Mooney for Best New Cafe. We've got Standart Magazine for Best Coffee Magazine. And Colin Harmon for Best Coffee Writing. And a super big congratulations to Ashley Rodriguez and Jasper Wild of Boss Barista Podcast for winning Best Coffee Podcast. Congratulations. And and lastly here, but not least at all, thank you to all of you for nominating this show. It was such an honor to be in this list of podcasters in the coffee industry and this list of people who are doing great work. So thank you very much. It was a real blast to just see the Keys to the Shop name up there. So let's get on with the show. Today we want to talk about power. We want to talk about power differentials and power dynamics in the cafe. Now, as you might guess, if you've been paying attention to any coffee news lately, the recent lawsuit brought against Jeremy Tucker of 4 Barrel Coffee in San Francisco, and just the information coming out of that lawsuit of sexual abuse and the toxic culture and leadership culture that enabled it. And it's just really disturbing to hear what's going on there. Ashley and Jasper have been doing such a fantastic job keeping everybody up to date on what's going on there. Definitely go to bossbarista.com to keep up to date with that. Their Instagram also is a really great resource. But all of this stuff, first of all, let me say it's incredibly disgusting and awful. And I don't think words can really do justice to the kind of pain and also to the bravery that these women who have brought this lawsuit represent. And more power to them for sure. Really hoping for justice in this case. This whole deal has got me thinking about anytime I go to a cafe, anytime I go in as a manager or leader myself in my career, I always think about, what it is that is happening in the cafe with the staff that is being enabled by leaders. When you get any kind of good or bad or average service, when you are in a barista position and you feel empowered and you feel taken care of, or you feel discouraged and you feel unheard or silenced. All of that has to do with a culture that's been allowed to grow. Anybody who has a position of influence or power in the coffee industry has the ability to make things better or do nothing and by default make things worse. I think things become worse when we do nothing. So personally, my opinion is that if all of us who are in leadership positions or hope to be in leadership positions, and I think that that's pretty much all of us, because at some point in our career, we're going to be in a leadership position. You're a leader if you have influence. If you have an audience of any kind, you're a leader. If I'm a manager in a cafe, even if I have a podcast where people who listen to it are putting themselves in the position of hearing and basically being vulnerable to my words, there is a huge responsibility to it. And we are I'm of the opinion that if we do our part across the board to hold ourselves accountable as leaders, then we are going to see fewer instances like this. I have 6 things that I think we should be paying attention to as we strive to be better leaders, as we strive to use the power that we're given. This case in California was the ultimate abuse of power and position. And, all of us are given a measure of authority in some way over another person in our life, whether official or unofficial. We're able to influence people and readily use that influence for good or for ill. And in the cafe, with your positions of shift lead, trainer, manager, director of education, director of coffee, assistant manager, owner, whatever it is, in coffee, we're all going to occupy one of these roles at some point or some derivation of these roles. If we stay in the industry for any length of time, even if there's no title given to us and we're just the most senior barista there, that's just an unofficial title that is giving us sway. People listen to you more, whether that's seniority or official position. And power is simply potential energy. And the more power you have in a cafe, the more potential you have to influence. Bottom line. And that should be for all of us a very fearful thing. We should worry about being leaders in any capacity because of the responsibility that it holds and the kind of influence that we have. If you're not worried, they say if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. That is for sure true. But if you're not worried, then you're not paying attention as well about yourself and your potential to use your position in a way, whether purposeful or accidental, to some damage. There is a lot that comes with positions. So let's talk about 6 truths about leadership that we need to kind of meditate on when we are given positions or aspire to or occupy positions of power in a cafe. Number 1, I think, is something we've already touched on, which is you want to walk with a measure of self-knowledge and knowledge of the weight of your position. So the position you're given automatically changes your relationship with your staff. There is weight to it, and you might not feel it. You know your intentions. People don't know your intentions. What people see is something different once you become a manager or once you become a trainer. Authority changes the relationship, and it gives more weight to your words for other people. So it's like gravity is stronger with them than it is with you. So when you walk into a room, people automatically have this asterisk pop up in their mind. Like what they're saying, they're just saying what they're saying, fine. But, the owner is here, or the manager is here, or the trainer is here, so you tamp differently. The manager is here, so you sweep differently, and so on and so forth. There is a check that we all put in our step, in our work, in our mind, when the person who is given charge over our work is present. So there's more weight, and it's kind of like, so I'll use an illustration here. So my son is 4, and he's a short guy. He's a 4-year-old, so he's short, and I am almost 40, and I'm tall. So when he comes by, I want to give him, a pat on the head. And a couple of years, when he started walking and everything, this is something I did, something I still do. So I, reached down to pat him on the head, and for a little bit there, all I heard was, ow. Now, really, it only happened a couple of times. I wasn't like 20 times hearing ow and thinking, gosh, I don't know why he's saying ow. After the first time, really, I noticed, yeah, it's because of this mammoth wedding ring that I've got on my finger. And I'm so used to it, I didn't realize that when I'm patting my son on the head, I'm actually, just lobbing this piece of metal onto his skull. And from his perspective, there's this big person, like, who it means the world to him, who's throwing metal at him. And that's not in my intention at all, but that's his perception. So what do? I alter my behavior to take into account the extra weight that my hand holds. In my case, I just try not to use the hand that the ring is on, because it's a big ring. So the first truth of leadership is walk with a measure of self-knowledge and knowledge about the weight of your position. The second thing is pretty huge, and that is when you're given power, you're given it to give it away. You have to give it away. You're a conduit, not a container. A great leader guides people, and it guides resources like a pipe, like a conduit of electricity or water. If your pipes, for plumbing, for instance, hold water too much, then you're going to have problems. And I've recently dealt with pipes that were not being very good conduits. It was not fun. And I'd say the measure of a good conduit is how well it distributes the thing that it was meant to distribute. We want to hang on to power because it feels good. None of us is above being corrupted by power. It sounds very, Lord of the Rings-ish, but we want to hang on to power because it feels good. Let's just admit it. It feels good, and that plays to our baser nature. But, no matter how, let's talk about electricity, no matter how bright one light shines, it's not going to light the whole house. You've got to get electricity and power to other places. So you got this line coming in from the pole to the house. You got to distribute that to the house, and then it's a good house. You've built a good thing. You're distributing power. So you receive the power of your position, then give it away, delegate, coach, guide people, bring people up, serve, repeat. Be aware of your power and leverage it for the benefit of your staff. It's not yours to keep. That power is not yours. The benefit to you comes from how much you benefit others. And again, a good conduit is a good distributor, not a good container. And I want to say right here, as we go, these are things I really, really believe in, and I know to be true because they're things that I have tripped up in myself. I've certainly made a barista feel small or unheard or not provided resource. I've done those things, and I am super, super grateful for the feedback that people have given me over the years to keep me as a leader in line. And so I want to just put that out there as a caveat here, kind of in the middle of things, to say I may be a little hopped up right now, but I feel like it's just because it's important. So forgive me if this comes off as too preachy, but just know that I'm absolutely preaching to myself in this. So be a conduit, not a container of your power. And number 3, create a culture where people can give feedback without repercussion. It boils down to communication. If your role is to be a conduit, a distributor of resource, then you need to be aware of where that distribution channel is being stopped up, where it's not being as efficient, where, is there electricity not getting to one room in the house? Is there water not coming to the bathroom? You need to know in order to know, you need to go there and test it out and find out. So in the cafe, a perfect example of this is the night shift that doesn't usually get a whole lot of leadership attention and therefore feels a little bit abandoned by leadership. If you work a night shift often, you'll know that this is true. You feel like it's a different cafe. And oftentimes that's just because there's not a presence of leadership that represents the mission of the company as often as there is in the morning. But, if power's not getting to the night shift, you need to be a better conduit. If you've got people who feel like they can't talk to you, then you're not going to change them to make them feel more confident. You need to be more inviting. Silencing voices as a leader is really easy. It's as easy as never addressing it in the first place. Because, as a leader, people automatically hesitate to communicate with you. We talked about that in the first place. Your position comes with this check in people's behavior. And that includes speech and often manifests itself in fewer instances of communication. And this problem can get out of hand really quickly. Now, this is especially true for people who are minorities on your staff, who already feel by virtue of their position in society marginalized or in the minority in your own cafe. So your default has to be to fight to listen. Fight to create communication channels, because neutral just goes backwards. It's not good enough to say you're always available, and if people don't take advantage of that, then it's not your fault. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I've totally thought that. But the point is, it's lazy. It's lazy thinking, and it shows that we are not thinking about the huge differential between you and the employee. Now, what this does not mean is that you're apologizing for your authority. People need strong leadership. Again, I want strong pipes in my house. I don't want flimsy pipes. People need strong leaders. It doesn't mean people can just say what they want to say whenever they want to say it. And that's a straw man kind of argument that leaders use to not get feedback because they feel like it's going to damage their authority if they invite feedback. You know what? The opposite is actually true. If you never get feedback and you never invite feedback, you won't be respected, and you won't have the kind of authority that creates a healthy work environment, and your business won't be healthy. People will leave. A toxic work culture is not necessarily something that happens because somebody tries to do bad things. It's most of the time, I think, because people fail to do good things with intention on a regular basis. Don't apologize for your authority, but use it the right way. Pursue feedback, create a culture, communicate with people, pursue communication. And when people understand that you are all about that it's very important to you, they're going to feel important and listened to as you listen to them. So that was the third thing. So now, number 4, charitable assumption. We always talk about this on the show because we're big Danny Meyer fans, and charitable assumption is one of those things that Danny looks for in potential managers in his restaurants. The truth here for leaders, number 4, is that charitable assumption for you has to be created. It has to be earned. You can't assume it. This may be extreme, and it's meant to sound extreme, but in a way, you're guilty until proven innocent. There's skepticism that exists around leadership. The gaps in communication that you leave are usually filled in by people's most readily available image or perception of leadership. And guess what? Especially this day and age, that's usually a negative perception of leadership. You have to consider the peripheral parts of your communication, the nuance, how it's going to be perceived, the verbal, the written, and the physical presence of your communication. Your body language, your face, all that stuff. Preemptive service. Let's say this. Preemptive service is all about thinking about what the guest needs before they ask, right? So you as well need to know what a barista or your group that you lead will ask for or need before the time comes. You're not going to be perfect at this, but you got to be open in that it's your goal. with people, tell them, I am trying to communicate in these ways because I want you to know, because I want you to know what my intentions are. And if you're focusing on those nuances, on preemptive communication, on empathetically making decisions and communicating those decisions to your staff, you're going to start seeing people become more respectful of you because you've proven it over time. You don't just get to have rapport because you're a manager. You start with positional power, and your goal is to have faith built in your integrity over time. So charitable assumption is earned. It's something that you have to create over time, and people will give it to you only as you earn it, and you have to pursue it with purpose. Don't just lean on positional power. Number 5 out of 6 truths about power. And by the way, there's probably like 200 truths about power. So I'd really encourage you, if there are other things in the Instagram post for this episode, definitely put those underneath the post and let's hear what it is, because these are just 6 things. And I'm sure I'm leaving some things out, and there are people who can speak to this in a more eloquent way than I can. So number 5, a truth about leadership is that you have to work to undo the damage of other leaders. When people come into the cafe as customers, they have had multiple experiences around coffee that we find out about as we interact with them. And it makes sense as we get to know what type of coffee they typically drink and where they usually go for coffee, and they describe what it tastes like, etc. We can start to piece together like, oh, like I know why you are considering coffee to be this way. Maybe they had bad coffee somewhere, or maybe they had bad service somewhere. Now what they're doing is they're coming into your cafe with all of that kind of baggage, and it's natural for them to imagine that the same thing will be repeated. So it's also true when you're talking about staff. So any person you have hired will either have had a great leadership experience in the past, in which case that's great, or they'll have had a negative one. And oftentimes you're going to get people who come from a cafe, and I find this to be true in, when you work for specialty coffee shops and you get people coming on board who are trying to pursue good coffee, they're coming from a coffee shop that may not have been doing a great job. And in a lot of cases, people will come to a cafe because they're trying to escape a dysfunctional one. You as a leader are inheriting the perception of leadership that all of your staff have in their heads as they become members of your team. So you've got to work to undo the damage that other leaders have done. And you do that simply by being a great leader and earning trust. It kind of back to number 4, earning that rapport and charitable assumption. Working to undo the damage of other leaders, it doesn't mean that you play psychologist with people. You're going to find out about their past with their old managers or trainers or whatever. But you simply need to be able to bear in mind that part of the burden you bear is to empathize with that situation and to use your leadership position as a means to give leadership a good name and to undo that negative stuff. And here's one huge way that you can break that cycle. First, start by breaking it in yourself. And what I mean by that is you can perpetuate negative leadership tendencies in yourself because you yourself have experienced negative leadership. So you have to be careful that you're not just mimicking or parroting your own negative influences from the past. This is super easy to do. It's more natural to learn and pick up bad habits and bad ways of management and leadership because they play into our toxic pride and the feelings of superiority that we get from holding on to power that drives us to want more. As humans, in our worst moments, we lord it over other people. And if you've had bad coaches, trainers, leaders, managers, make sure you identify what it was that was so impactful, negatively impactful to you, and examine what exactly they were. Give it a name, and look at yourself and see if you have taken on some of those things just by osmosis, just by being around it. Ask your friends and family, do you see these things in me? And then if the answer is yes, if you see that you can snap at people because you were snapped at, if you see that you can dismiss people's opinions because your opinions were dismissed, then employ the opposite discipline. Employ the opposite of those habits on a regular basis and get people to hold you accountable. Be open and honest with people. That brings us to number 6 on the list. The truth about power is that in order to use power responsibly, you've got to pursue humility at all costs. And I say at all costs because what's at stake here is people's careers, people's emotional well-being, people's livelihoods, including your own. And so nobody wants you as a leader to be perfect. Nobody wants you to know it all. This is something that I struggle with is, especially somebody, on a podcast, I'm talking about coffee. I definitely don't know it all. And in fact, this podcast has taught me so much. And I hope that I learn a ton this year too. But I still struggle with wanting to sound like I know a lot about something. And I suspect I'm not the only one, but mostly people, rather than having a perfect boss or a perfect leader, they just want to feel valued and known by someone they respect. And they want to be on a journey of development forward toward their goals and the company goals that they signed on for with those people that they respect. Even with that power differential that you have as a leader, there is still a sense of camaraderie. It's not the same as barista to barista. In a way, it really can't be. You're kind of outside of the culture a little bit. But just know that people want to be on this journey with you if they respect you and you respect them. And the most respectable thing to do, I think, is to pursue humility and admit, yeah, I don't know it all. I need to learn. And you can actually learn a lot from your staff. You're going to fail. And when you fail, you need to apologize. Yes, to your staff, to a barista. And I know a lot of owners over the years that might hesitate to say sorry to a barista because because they think, I've sacrificed so much for the company and I've sacrificed so much to make their job possible. In a weird way, they think they don't owe them an apology. Well, they're a fellow human being. And if you did something that is, and if you did something to offend or that was wrong, apologize, change, and seek accountability. You don't necessarily have to seek accountability with your staff. You can, because we talked about feedback. That's a really good way to know if you're making progress. But talk with other managers who want to do the same thing, who want to hold each other accountable for being great leaders. People still need you as a leader, and apologizing and changing, it may be seen as a form of losing ground by some, as if we're in a war, but you're not in a war. You're an advocate and a guide for people that work for you, and you're not a general in an army. Your position and the amount of positive influence that you have in the company will be strengthened only as much as you gain the respect and build and strengthen the staff. So holding yourself accountable as a manager, seeking out accountability and humility, vulnerability, gives you the edge to then be able to effectively hold other people accountable, which would be part of your job as a leader. You want to correct somebody's tamping, then you better be ready to receive feedback from a barista who catches you tamping wrong. You want to talk to your staff about communication. you better be open to the staff telling you that you're not very good at communicating. And again, I've learned some of these lessons the hard way. The final thing I'll say about this is that humility is all about including yourself in the equation. You as a leader, a holder of power of any kind, are culpable for the results in some way. Always. If you're not part of the equation, then you're doing the wrong math, and it just doesn't add up. So you have to make sure that instead of looking to blame other people for the problems that you see in the company, make sure that they see you looking for ways that you can solve issues that you have introduced to the company yourself. Because as the one who holds the most power, often the problem is at that root. So that is, I think, a good place to end here. And honestly, I think sometimes have leaders and managers who are in wrong positions, that maybe leadership is not for you. Maybe management or even ownership is not for you in a certain way, because you are in such a state of disrepair in terms of your perception of power, that to take power would be negligent. So it's better to step down preemptively than to continue broken and then break others in the process. So in review, we have 6 truths about power that we need to keep in mind always as leaders in order to properly use the power given to us in these positions. Number 1, walk with a measure of self-knowledge and the knowledge of the weight of your position. Number 2, give away power. You're a conduit, not a container. Give it away. Distribute it. Number 3, create a culture where people can give feedback without repercussion. A safe place for communication. Number 4, charitable assumption and rapport and respect is something that you create over time. You earn it, and you've got it, and it takes work. Number 5, you have to work to undo the damage of other leaders, of the other influences of leadership, not only in the perception of others that come into your store, but also making sure that you're not perpetuating things yourself from your own influences. And finally, number 6, we must pursue humility at all costs. Be vulnerable, be on a journey with people, be a learner, and admit your faults, apologize, correct, keep going. And I feel like if we do at least these things, we're going to be in a better position as leaders to undo some of these cycles of toxicity that exist in the service industry that we inhabit in coffee. So I hope that some of this was helpful for you. And I know that I'm going to come up on circumstances where I need to practice these things myself. And so I'm looking to become really better and better at these things. I want to reiterate something here, and that is most of us at some point are going to have power to influence somebody else. Yeah, it's really cheesy for people to call themselves influencers. I agree. But we do hold sway over the opinion of others if we have any kind of audience, especially if we're in an official capacity in a cafe. And we should not take that responsibility lightly. We should definitely walk with reverence for those we lead and for the power that comes with that position, and use it to empower others and use it to lift up those that we lead. A conduit is something that you need for a functioning, healthy structure, but it's not necessarily something you see a lot of. Mostly it's behind the walls, sturdy, flowing, and that's us. That's what you have to do when you're in that position of leadership. Be steady, be open, be strong, and distribute that power, distribute that energy all amongst the staff in the cafe. And I hope as we all pursue that we see better environments, healthier environments for us to practice our craft and do what we love without worry for our safety, without worry for our well-being, And yeah, so if you want to know more, you can go to keystotheshop.com and visit the resources tab. There you'll see the show notes for this episode. You can also get on our emailing list where I will be sending you the show notes each week to your inbox. That is going to present itself as a menu that comes up on the website. Just enter your email address, and every week you'll get the show notes that includes the key insights from each episode, as well as the links mentioned in the episode and other links to helpful resources. So today, we're going to link to Boss Barista. We're going to link to services that are offering jobs to people displaced by what's going on over there in California and Four Barrel, and a couple other links to things that are helpful for us as leaders to bear in mind to have a balanced perspective on being a responsible leader in providing a good and healthy culture. I also have some news for you, and that is this year I have signed on for Coffee Fest at all of the shows in 2018. That's Baltimore and Denver and LA, to judge latte art and also to do some speaking. So a couple of campfire sessions, shorter half-hour sessions, and then some lectures in the morning. And that includes podcast-related content like the top 5 rules for a successful cafe, rules taken from all of our past guests who are on Founder Friday. That's going to be a great talk, as well as a talk on the essential elements of effective management, a campfire session on the state of retail today, kind of a talk about trends and things, more about movements and things to pay attention to, and not so much about trends, but that's going to be an interesting one. So go on to Coffee Fest website, get the dates and the schedule for the shows. It's only $30 to go to Coffee Fest. It's really accessible, and I always enjoy going. So I hope to see some of you there in Baltimore, Denver, and LA. And yeah, great stuff. So that's it for me today. I really hope that you have an amazing week and that the content in today's episode was helpful to you. I know it's not complete. There is so much more that can be said. And again, I'm going to be trying to link to people that have other perspectives on this that are going to be helpful for you. But yeah, I, as always, truly hope that this episode has given you keys to the shop.